you aren't enough is what I always believed growing up. No one really ever told me that, but that's a voice that I had heard, either because I was just compared to my brothers and the youngest of four, or I would just look at everyone else, I'd compare myself, and I would just realize I'm not good enough, I'm not enough. And that's for some reason the lie that Satan whispered to me all the time that I carry to this day, and it's a difficult one. John 10:10 says that the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but Jesus says, I have come that you might have life and life to the full. And so he's talking about my sheep, they know my voice in that John 10 dialogue. It's this beautiful passage, yet it's so difficult for any of us to actually take into our hearts and to follow. And so what I want to say is you might be hearing different voices. I mean, let's recognize there are so many voices that are vying for our attention day in and day out, telling us we're not good enough, telling us we're not lovable, telling us we're not beautiful, telling us that we don't have power and authority, telling us that we need to strive to do better, we need to be better, we need to look better, we need to post more, we need to, and whatever it is, it's telling us we can do all these other things so that we can receive love. And I want to just help us recognize that there are other voices, recognize what the other voices are, and then step into the voice of the Father and let that be the dominating voice. Attune and align our hearts and our lives to that voice, not the other voices. Because how much more free would we be if we believed that we truly are lovable, that we truly are enough, that we don't need to strive in order to receive love, that we don't need to be perfect. In fact, we have a perfect Father who sent his perfect Son to die on the cross to make us perfect. How can we just receive? So one of the things I want to point at is this thing called the Shema. It's what the old Hebrews, they would memorize, and then they would, as they wake up, they would say the Shema, and as they'd go to bed, they would say the Shema. As they'd go in and out of synagogue, they would say the Shema. And it's Deuteronomy 6:4, and it says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children. You should talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand. They shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates." Now, the first part, the "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one," that's the part that most people memorize. But the part after that talks about how do we remind ourselves of the truth of God. He says, write it all over the place. Put it on your doorpost. Put reminders in front of you at all times. Remember that God says you are loved, you are worthy, you are powerful, he is for you, he will not leave you, you are never alone, you don't have to strive, you are already accepted. All of those things are true of you. Now, if you're anything like me, you might be like, okay, cool, Stevie, I know you're saying all these things about me, but I don't believe that. And let me just read this verse in Judges 6. It's about this guy named Gideon. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's one of the judges who he saves Israel. And God says to him in verse 12, he says, "The Lord is with you, O mighty man of valor." Now you might be like, yeah, I know the story of Gideon. He is a mighty man of valor. But if you actually look at who he is and who he was, when God says that, he wasn't. He was afraid and he was questioning God. He said, "Behold, my clan is the weakest, and I am the least in my father's house." And then he goes down in verse 27, he says, "But because he was too afraid of his family," right? He's this man who's fearful. And so God spoke this truth over him that he didn't believe. In fact, it probably didn't even seem true about him at all. And I think that that's something that we need to step into, is God does say these things about you. He says you're beautiful and you might not believe it. He says you're worthy and you might not believe it. He says you're accepted and you might not believe it. He says that you are enough and you might not believe it. I know that I don't. But one of these things that we need to do is, back in the Shema, is bind them to ourselves, write them down, put them on our doorposts. What can we do to remind ourselves and let that just be truth that we keep speaking over ourselves again and again? And so a couple practical things. One is we need to be reading the Bible, but another thing is once you read the Bible, write something on a sticky note. If there's something that's true about you that God says, write that verse on a sticky note and put it on your mirror. Put it, like if you drive, put it like in your, what is that thing called?
Dashboard? Rearview mirror. Visor.
Hat. Sunshield.
Visor.
Wind. Umbrella.
I thought that was visor.
Is it a visor?
I'm pretty sure it's a
In the
visor.
car?
Yeah.
The car guy?
Yeah. I don't think visor.
I call it fluffy. Stick
Cool.
the little flappy.
Cool. Write it on a sticky note and put it on your mirror, or if you drive, put it in the little floppy thing in your car. Put it places where you're gonna find it. Put a reminder on your phone. I know at 12:30 every day, I have a reminder on my phone that goes off that just says, be still. And it's just a reminder for me to be still before God and to remember that He's God and I'm not. And so that's just a good reminder for me. I literally have it on my phone, 12:30 every day. Whatever I'm doing, I let that reminder be a reminder to me. I stop and I be still. And I remember, God, you're in control and I'm not. I let these things be reminders for me. How can you set reminders before yourself? How can you put reminders on your phone or in your room or on your doorpost or in your car or whatever that is? How can you remind yourself of the truth of what God says of you, His voice being more dominant than the voice that tells you you're not enough, you're not lovable, you're not good, any of those things that though they might feel true, they aren't true. Jesus has spoken a bigger truth, a more true truth over us that we need to step into and start to believe about ourselves and start to step into. So you need to know you are so loved. We love you, I love you, and I hope that these are helpful for you. I hope that we took you out in nature. It's been nice for you in the midst of quarantine. But I can't wait to worship with you guys again, and I hope you keep reminding yourselves of the truth. Love you guys.